Good morning, Drive Tribe. How are we doing this morning? It is the Drive at 5 with Jeffrey. We are back. We are drinking out of the heads of our enemies. We are joking there, but this is from the 2024 playoffs. That went really well for Atlanta versus Inter Miami. And so they're playing this weekend. So we're having a little sip out of Messi's face here. He may or may not play. Apparently they advanced, I think, in the CONCACAF last night. So we'll see if they play this weekend. He's probably going to sit out, but I don't know. Let's see what Atlanta can do here in the Dome, or whatever we're calling it nowadays, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But it's a dome, whatever. All right, let's move on. It is time to celebrate National Pie Day. Who doesn't like pie? I mean, I enjoy pie. We had a National Pie Day, P-I-E Day. Today is National Pie Day, P-I Day, which is celebrating the number pi. So pi is the ratio between the circumference of a circle and its diameter. While the idea of pi has been known for 4,000 years, accurately calculating has been somewhat of a slightly more recent mathematical development. How about that? I still can't calculate it. Just kidding. By 2000 BC, the Egyptians and Babylonians accurately used the constant to build, and then mathematicians such as Archimedes, Fibonacci, Francis Viette, Adriana von Roman, and Goderfield Wilhelm Leibniz all calculated pi by various methods. However, in 1706, Welsh mathematician with the most somewhat generic name ever, William Jones, introduced the Greek letter pi to represent the ratio of a circle's circumference, pi. So how can you observe National Pie Day? You can enjoy a slice of pie, a pizza pie, anything that's in a circle. You could have enjoyed a blood moon last night when we had the total lunar eclipse there, which I didn't recognize what a total lunar eclipse is, but basically the Earth sits in front of the sun or between the sun and the moon, and because of the longer wavelengths, you get a red moon. What happens is the sun's light still comes around a little bit around the Earth as it goes through atmosphere, and the light is stretched. You only get the longer wavelengths, and so it appears that rusty or red color. Little science lesson in the middle there. Okay, so how to observe National Pie Day: celebrate slice of pie, host a pie eating contest, discuss the significance of the number pi. This one's funny. Watch the life of pi, or look for any of the sales that might be out there on items being dropped down to prices like 3.14. So you can find any kind of deal out there. I think there's probably some pie deals that are going to be $3 break anyway. All right, so the frequently asked question: who holds the record for the most digits of pi memorized? And that was in 2014. Rajavir Miana memorized 70,000 decimal places of pi, and is certified by the Guinness Book of World Records. I can't remember 70,000 anything. I don't know how you'd memorize 70,000 decimals of pi. That's pretty crazy. All right, let's go ahead and transition to this day in history. By the way, it's going to be a really fast show in the beginning because we've got something kind of cool to get to, which is how to keep your cool when facing pushback. That's why we're calling it Frosty Friday. All right, let's go to some historical events. Okay. I got to figure out how to not hear the thump of my cup going back on the desk, but we'll get there. As my buddy Chad would tell me. All right, so this day in history, Eli Whitney is granted a patent for the cotton gin in 1794. In 1900, the United States currency is placed on the gold standard. Don't we sort of wish sometimes that was still the case? Probably not, because there's probably some economists that would tell me why we have to be disconnected from the gold standard, but it sure did seem like a simpler time. In 1910, the Lakeview Gusher causes the largest accidental oil spill in history. The spill lasted 18 months, and it had 9 million barrels of crude oil were released. I'd really like for one of those spills to happen, like, into some barrels that I own. That'd be nice. A little Jed Clampett, can I shoot the backyard? And all of a sudden, or was it Judd? Anyway, the I'd love to get some of that Texas tea myself. In 1923, the first ever complete radio broadcast of a hockey game happened. All right. And then in 1942, I thought this was interesting. For the first time in history, a dying patient's life is saved by penicillin. Although some claim that the pioneering trials at the Radcliffe Infirmary in Oxford, England, resulted in the first cures using penicillin, Orvin Hess and John Bumstead are generally credited with the first documented successful treatment. That's crazy. 1942. To think about how we use antibiotics today, and just how recent of a discovery that is very interesting. In 1960, the leaders of Germany and Israel confer for the first time 15 years after the end of World War II. West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer and Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion met at the Waldorf Astoria in New York. It's very interesting. Okay. In 1991, the Birmingham Six are released. The 6 men had been wrongly sentenced to life imprisonment in 1975 for the IRA bombing or Birmingham pub bombings. And then in 2004, Vladimir Putin is reelected as president of Russia. Thought that was kind of interesting because of, obviously the Russia-Ukraine conflict that's going on. I keep getting mixed information back and forth there, but it does sound like there was sort of a ceasefire agreed to by Ukraine. Russia says they'll do it, and now they're, of course, now they're at their demands. So we'll continue to monitor the situation, and as those things develop, we'll report on them. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through the inner workings. That's not what you're here to learn. All right, let's go to birthdays. All right, in 1833, the first female dentist, Lucy Hobbs, was born in New York State. In 1854, Paul Ehrlich was a German physician and Nobel Prize laureate. Let's get to more recent here. In 1933, Mr. Michael Caine, the English actor and author, was born. In 1947, Billy Crystal. In 1961, Kirby Puckett, the baseball player. And in two that I thought were interesting, just because it's Pi Day, and Simone Biles in 1997, and Stephen Curry. So if we want to talk about people that are good at going in a circle, being Simone Biles, and putting a ball in a hoop that is circular, Stephen Curry. So that's pretty cool here on Pi Day. All right, let's get down to business. All right, you came to hear the end of our 3-part series. We'll obviously continue this as we need to, but it's about change management. It's about how to enact process change inside of a business, inside of your home. Look, we hit on a couple of different things. So we first hit on the PDCA, so plan, do, check, and act, and how to break that down, starting with the waste audit. We did that on Monday's show. If you missed it, I thought it was pretty good, and I think you can learn a little bit from it. If you want to go back and kind of get a base or a foundation for what we're going to talk about today, that's where it really started. And that plan, do, check, and act is a way to implement a framework for implementing process change in any situation. And it starts with that waste audit. What are we doing that's wasteful? How do we find what stinks, right? That's sniffing out the trash can and understanding what to do from there. All right. And then we talked about how do we get it to be a team sport? So how do we get everybody on the team to understand what stinks and to be committed to the plan to fixing what stinks? So what we talked about there is starting with the why, making it a team sport, keeping it simple, modeling it yourself if you're the leader or just if you're being a good follower, and then celebrating the wins. What are the small wins that we can celebrate that keep the momentum going? So if you missed that one, again, That was on Wednesday's show about how do we get everybody to agree what stinks. If everybody's saying, well, it smells pretty good to me, it's really hard to get them to commit to changing. So that was Wednesday's show. So now we're going to talk about how to keep your cool, because here's what's going to inevitably happen. No matter how good you are at explaining the why or talking about the change, there's going to be some pushback because you're not going to have thought of everything. By the way, I would never recommend that you think of everything. We haven't thought of everything on this show. So part of the plan, do, check, and act is it's not about perfect. It's about progress, right? As long as we're going up and to the right and we're building on what we've done before, then we're making incremental progress, and that is what we're trying to do, just getting better a little bit every day. And if you can keep that going, in order to keep that going, that requires you to act. And so that doesn't mean you're going to think about every little detail in things that don't require it. If you're doing surgery, that's different. Let's think about every detail. But if you're going to have to adjust on the fly in most things that we do in life. Also, by the way, it is Flat Bill Friday, in case I didn't mention that. All right. So you may have a skeptical teammate, but here's how you handle. Here's 5 practical steps. So we're going to give you 5 on how to handle when you experience that pushback. So let's start with the first one. Listen first, react later. And you do have to be careful if your face has subtitles. That's important, okay? Because some people, you can read what they're thinking while they're having a conversation with you. You got to keep that under control if you're leading change, or if you're just a change champion, because that's another thing you can be, is you can be a change champion. Hey, your job in that is that you have to be fully committed to the change, and you have to be able to adapt on the fly. So listen first, react later. I had a recent situation with this where I was in a room with a group full of people, and we were talking about a pretty major change, and the leader allowed everybody at the table to speak their piece. Everybody got to say what they wanted to say. And they waited until the very end, and they said, okay, has everybody kind of got everything out? Yes, okay. Well, all right, let me give you some things that we're going to do from here. And I'm going to try to address everybody's points. Now, you're not always going to do that, and depending on what type of pushback you're receiving, and we'll talk about the 2 different personality types and the 2 different types of pushback, you're going to decide how you react, whether it's public or private, and if you're going to handle it right there at that moment, or if it's going to be a later conversation. But when you encounter pushback, it's important that you resist the urge to jump ahead or overtalk someone. And when you're having those conversations, and I am not saying that I do this perfectly, so nobody get that misconstrued as we have these conversations, that Jeffrey knows what he's doing. I have learned the principles and the procedures and the policies, and then I try to practice them just like anybody else, and don't get them right every day. But as you're talking to someone, do not try to anticipate everywhere they're going. Genuinely sit in the conversation. Be present in that moment with them. And as you're present in that moment with them, you will get to go through the journey mentally and almost metaphysically, however you want to say it. You're following them through their journey. Now, you may have already thought about 10 steps ahead. You may already have the answer and the solution, but do not try to take them from step 1 to step 10 immediately in a conversation. Now, you can guide as you see things coming. You can ask good questions like, have you considered? Tell me more. You can do all of those things, but you do not want to take them there. And take me to step 2, which is stay curious, not defensive. Because the first thing that will happen if you get defensive is they'll get defensive. And then it's serve volley, and we're playing a tennis match over a change that needs to happen without really hearing each other or understanding each other. Okay, so stay curious and not defensive. What could happen is you start to understand where they're really coming from, and you'll take yourselves to point 4 later, okay? But again, stay curious, not defensive. This goes back to I don't know if anybody else has seen the Ted Lasso season 1. He's playing darts with the owner's ex-husband, and he's like, "Hey, I drove by and I saw this little statement about Walt Whitman had said, which, by the way, it's attributed to Walt Whitman, but not true necessarily that he said it. I don't know who actually said it, but it said, be curious, not judgmental. And in that particular case, Ted's saying like, hey, if you'd been curious, you would have asked me, because they're betting over the darts. You would have asked me if I played a lot of darts. And he'd say, I played every day when I was 16 with my dad until I was 16 after Saturday lunch or whatever it was. But the point being is that you can use that advice here. Stay curious. Don't be judgmental or defensive. All right. Step 3. Now you keep your tone and your tempo steady. Okay. It's going to sound silly, but how you speak to them is going to determine how they respond to you. So if they come in yelling and screaming, if you can adjust your tone, humans tend to model behavior and reflect what's coming back to them. So if you lower the energy, they'll lower the energy. And if you can express to them that you're hearing them, they'll say, hey, okay. Mentally, their switch goes off a little bit, dials back the amplitude, and they can settle into having a real conversation with you. Because at first, they may just want to yell and scream and get something out because they may be really frustrated. And this goes back to, this can be part of the check processes. Let me check in with my team members frequently so those little frustrations don't add up to a big frustration. Okay? Don't let that pushback get you in a spiral. That's not where you want to go. You want to be able to listen to them, be curious throughout the conversation, let the conversation go where it's going to go. They may solve their own problem, but keep your tone steady and smooth as you go through. And then finally, this is where you find the win-win. Step 4. Is there a win-win? And this will be determined partially by what personality type they are in what we're going to talk about later. But can you find the win-win? Is there an easy solution? Did we talk about it enough that now we both feel like, hey, with some more facts, with some minor tweaks, we can get there? When I talk about that process change map that I showed you, and if you guys go and look on the Facebook page, we've got pictures and different ways you can look at process change. And some of them seem very dramatic, but your team members and yourself, you're going to go through, even if you're just personally making a change in your own life, you're going to go through those emotions and those feelings of, oh man, I'm defeated today. I'm depressed today. This isn't going to happen. There's no way. And you're going to bounce up and down, but you want that bounce to lead to the up and to the right? You want to lead to progress. So you got to determine from this person's perspective, is this pushback? Like, is it just a speed bump? Is it something we can make better in the process? Or is it a stop sign? Is what they're saying to me a point that's so contentious in this process change that we're just not ready to make this change? And that's okay. That's part of the plan, do, check, and act. Is in the check phase, sometimes you stop and you say, this isn't going to work. I'll give you an example. I had a process that was getting implemented, new software, and that new software was getting implemented. And every time you would enter a line in the software, and it was like a quoting software, whatever it was, and you'd enter the line, and you hit enter. It would take you all the way to the back of the top of the page. Well, that's fine if you only have one line to enter. But if you got 100 lines to enter on this quote request or whatever it is, well, I don't want to go back to the top of the page. I want to go to the next line, just like you would in Excel. If every time you entered something to Excel in, let's say, A 10,272, it took you back to A1, well, that would be a miserable way to work. And so it was like, hey, this isn't going to improve our process. This is going to make us any faster. This is going to slow us down. The folks were using the software were using email previously to communicate this stuff and weren't entering it into like a formal data log or whatever. And so you were saying to them, hey, you're going to go from a really fast process that the problem is traceability and tracking and data collection isn't there in an email. And you're going to move into this new process, and this new process is going to not only increase your time because you're having to punch it in, but increase your time off of things that are just not good about the software. Well, that's a stop sign. We can't do that. We thought we were eliminating waste and generating a knowledge base. And in fact, we were creating more waste, and that's in wasted time, which you can list the different types of waste. One of those is time and effort. And so, yeah, it could be a stop sign or it could be a speed bump. And that's step 4. Can you find the win-win? Is there a win-win to be had, as in we can continue moving and progressing? Or is this person really telling me, or multiple people, this is a stop sign and we need to quit right here and figure this out? And that's okay too. That's when you go back to the plan phase. All right. And then I kind of hit on this already. Know when to pause, know when to pivot. That's 5. Okay. And that's, if it's a stop sign, you're pivoting and going to the next thing. If it's a speed bump, maybe you're pausing and just helping them get over the speed bump. So we went through the 5 phases pretty quick there. Let's just talk through a summary here. The big takeaway here is that pushback is going to happen, and it is part of the process. If you try to squash it too hard or go too fast, you're going to lose credibility with your team members. And even if you feel like you're only frustrating one, I promise you some of the other people in the room are on their side and think the same thing they do. They just may be willing to speak up. Part of good followership. So let me just say this. We've been talking about this from a leadership perspective. If you're one of the team members that is following through this process, if you have criticism and you want to talk about it, criticism about the process change or how it's being handled or how it's being implemented, talk to the change leader directly. Have a personal conversation. Handle it in private before you bring it and air it in public. And the reason you do that is you give them opportunity to prepare for the fact that this is going to, if they're open and receptive, you want to prepare them for, hey, these are some of the things that we've had challenges with in a small group or in a private setting, so that they don't have to feel attacked and they don't get defensive. Because part of being a good leader is also being a good follower. You know, if a leader doesn't have followers, they're just out on a walk. But if a follower doesn't have a leader, you know, they need them too, right? They need to bolster their leaders and be good followers. And so being a good follower is part of being a good leader. Do not fight unfairly. Okay, so let's take a bonus look here at the 2 personality types. And you need to know, it's important, are you being one of these if you're a follower, or are you encountering one of these as a leader? So I'm going to explain it with some analogies, but let's start with the typings, okay? The first type, that's the skeptic. This is a constructive critic, all right? You'll see this in a mindset that they're open to change, but they need convincing. These can be some of your high performers who are really just trying to get their hands around what this change means to them and what it's going to do, and they want to see the why. Okay, their pushback style is typically critical, but it's logical. Like, hey, oh, that makes sense. Hey, they're telling me to return to office. All right, let me understand this, because I don't really feel like I need the return to office. Maybe there's people who've expressed an interest in return to office. Maybe there's financial things about having occupancy at our facility that the insurance is asking us to do. Maybe it's about the psychological impact on our team members that have to be in for example, if you worked at a Target store and everybody in the management, the general manager didn't come into the office, he will work from home or whatever, or the people at the corporate office are working from home, but you're at the store and you have to be on the floor all the time. Well, in some ways, it's psychologically good for you to say, like, hey, corporate's going to commit to coming in too. We're all in this together, right? And that gives that perception of like, okay, we're all equally yoked here. and it makes the team members that are actually out there, stocking the shelves and checking people out feel more comfortable. So you got to ask yourself, am I dealing with somebody who's fighting fair here? Are they the constructive critic, or are they a never changer, which we'll get into. So the pushback style from a constructive critic, critical but logical. They're trying to figure out the impact of the change and can they strengthen the change. Sometimes they'll be the ones that'll give you the best advice and they'll help you strengthen what you're trying to do, the process improvement. And then how do you manage them? So with a constructive critic, you're going to give them more information. You're going to try to assuage their concerns with data, and you're going to help them navigate through it, and so they can be some of your best change champions because now they've bought into the process. They feel like they're part of it, and they're going, okay, now I can go out and I can navigate these waters and I can fight for you. And those are the folks that you really want to spend and sow a lot of time in. You still a lot of times want to take them into private to understand their concerns and assuage those. And if you are a constructive critic, if you're one of those people that feels like you need to be critical of the change, get with the leader who's leading the change and explain those things to them and say, hey, here are the things I could see, and here's some places I need more information, and you'll help them be better at presenting it to the group, the broader group. Okay, and then you have what I call the never changer or the rigid resistor. Now, if you think about this in sports terms, the constructive critic, if you look back to Remember the Titans, for example, the constructive critic is the one that's saying, hey, I think it was Coach Boone, hey, you need to be, I'm going to coach the defense. Like, you need to be coaching the defense. And then all of a sudden he comes up with an offensive play. That's the constructive critic, right? They're saying like, hey, I understand that we're coaching offense and defense here, but I do have some ideas that can cross those lines, and let me help you out, right? It's not being rude or resisting the change of the new head coach that played by Denzel in the Remember the Titans series. It's more of, okay, we've built some credibility, we've talked, we've had conversations. This is no longer about a us versus them situation here, or me versus you situation here. This is me crossing the lines and going, I see something, let me help you. Okay. Now, where you have the never changer, that's more like when I forget the guy's name, but he wouldn't block for the running back. Okay, that's the one that's almost a defender when you're trying to play offense, right? He's letting bad things happen, and so with a never changer, and it's never a situation where you should say they're never going to change. There may be a chance of moving a never changer, this bona fide resistor, over to the constructive critic with enough time and energy. However, you may not have time to do that as a manager or as a leader. Okay. But here's how you can identify that style. They're going to be fundamentally opposed to all changes, regardless of evidence or logic. Okay. If they're not responding to logic and well thought out logic, you may be dealing with a never changer. Their pushback style is usually going to be emotional. So they're going to be upset. They're going to be dismissive. They're going to be very passive aggressive, and they may say things kind of snide and not really to you, but at you or at the group. And that's going to bring negativity to the change as a whole. Their impact on change is usually they create morale issues. They usually slow the progress, and they will will influence others to resist the change as well. So you have to be careful when you deal with them. So how do you manage that? You got to identify the root cause. Sometimes it's just they fear they're going to lose their job. You got to explain to them why they're going to continue in the process, because maybe they've been the only one that could do this in the past or whatever it is. They may feel like, hey, we've had 15 different programs and they're very jaded about it. You have to help them understand why this time is different. And then you got to appeal to their interest. Like, how can the change benefit them personally? That's really important as well. But if you still go through all that and you see I'm still getting the resistance, you have to set clear expectations and boundaries. And then you have to limit their influence, right? And you almost always want to deal with a never changer in private. And sometimes you got to talk to them very frankly. And you got to say, hey, I understand you don't want this to happen based on what you're doing. Is that true? And then let them explain, just like we talked about earlier. Listen, don't react. And if they say, yeah, I don't. Okay, now you can have a real honest conversation. Say, whether it's corporate or it's you, we've made the decision as a business here that this is the right thing for us to do. I need you to either get on board or at least at minimum stop causing disruption in this change that's going to happen because we're making it happen. Now, those are rare conversations. Generally, you can influence people before you get there, but it may come a time as a leader where you have to have a real frank and open conversation with people. So you have to make your decision on who's who and what's what. All right, so with that, let's close out today. I think we've went through some very important things. I'll recap those steps for you here at the end, but I want to hit one more thing on the verse of the day. So I picked a verse today, and it's from Proverbs 15:1. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And this is very appropriate, in my opinion, for what we just talked about. When pushback flares up, a gentle, steady response can calm the storm, but a harsh one will just throw fuel on the fire. You don't want to be in a serve volley situation. So think about that the next time you feel the heat rising. With that, let's close. We've covered 5 ways to handle pushback without losing your cool and keep it frosty, even on a Friday. Listen first, stay curious, keep your tone steady, find the win-win, know when to pause and when to pivot. We've also covered 2 personalities that you're going to face during pushback, the constructive critic and the rigid resistor. And we sort of talked about how to deal with each of those personality types differently. If you got a pushback story, I'd love to hear it down in the comments. As you go through your PDCA, if you ever have any questions or if you want to talk it out on the show or have it featured on the show, let me know. You can send us on Facebook Messenger, or you can text me if you know my number personally. I'm not going to give that out over the internet, but the plan is to have a Faith 2 show later today with Will. I'm not sure if that's going to be achievable. I may have some stuff where we have to cancel that and we'll have to do it again next week. Until then, keep experimenting, keep changing, keep making good choices so you don't have to make excuses. We love you. We want you to be successful. We're trying to give you some tips and some tools to make that happen. If you have commentary on how we could make that better, please feel free to let us know. But thank you for joining us on the H2 show. As you know, we don't say goodbye. We say see you real soon. Shout out to Disney. But
at the end of the day, the day got to end.